Today I want to talk with you about how we can build a home oasis with green stormwater infrastructure. My name is Shannon Brown. I'm the founder of Ecosystem Regeneration Artisans, which is a landscaping company that designs, installs, and maintains rainscapes, which are a form of green infrastructure that harvests rainwater and sinks it into the ground for the purpose of helping our wildlife and helping our rivers. This presentation was made for the Texas Riparian Association Symposium. And without further ado, I want to dive right in, talking about how important it is for us to have third spaces in this distance world where we need to retreat from our work and the indoor spaces where we are surviving this pandemic. So in this example, we built a homestead prairie restoration rainscape at Double Z Ranch, which is near the Medina River. We do quite a lot of outreach promoting rainscapes on social media. We have about 1,500 followers on Facebook currently, and we are just about to launch t-shirts with this design showing how rainscapes save water and the roots of our native plants both sink water into the ground to help our rivers have more sustained flow between rain events during droughts. And also, when we catch the water in these basins, we prevent flash flooding from happening at that time. It takes thousands of these rain gardens to really make a watershed-wide impact, but each garden is a drop in a bucket, and eventually, with enough drops, we end up with a full bucket. Here we have a drone image of the project at completion in May. So this was phase one of the project where we dug the basins and prepped the ground for phase two when we planted the trees. We didn't plant trees at this time because getting them to survive through the hot Texas summer would just have taken a lot of water and we would have probably seen some tree mortality. So we did a second phase in November, and this is what the site looked like at that time. You can see that a lot of green growing life is happening in that space. So when we make this transformation from a lawn to a rainscape, we slow the rain down, we spread it out, and we sink it into the soil. And what that does is it puts water into the ground beneath our feet, which nurtures the plants around our homes and also helps keep our rivers cool, clear, and flowing, not flooding for generations to come. Because when we have a turf grass lawn like this, the water has nowhere to go. It flows across the surface and flash floods down into the local creeks and rivers. This is the story throughout much of Texas and throughout much of the suburban landscape and urban landscape. And there's a solution to that problem that's actually fairly simple and quite aesthetically pleasing. It just takes a little bit of digging. So what we did was we dug out these basins to catch rainwater. We sculpted the earth by hand and by machine. At the end of phase one, this is how the front porch looked, and the homeowners were delighted to be able to sit on their porch and watch the stormwater from our thunderstorms flow out the gutter, flow through that dry creek there on the left, out into the basin, and nourish their new native plants, which supported clouds of butterflies in the fall, throughout the summer. The Greg's Mist flower that we planted along the porch turned out absolutely beautiful and would be covered in butterflies for them to enjoy. We also had lots of birds that would come and visit the seed-producing native grasses and flowers as well. So we really helped some of the keystone target species with this. Some of the features that we had in this rainscape are 16,000 gallons of catchment in the earthworks to avoid runoff. We also provided organic food security to these homeowners because they were able to harvest food out of this landscape. We restored an endangered ecosystem. Less than 1% of the native prairie is left in the US. A lot of that land has been converted to corn and soy and wheat and hay production, as well as cattle grazing land. We also made habitat for wildlife, including the gorgeous painted buntings, the wonderful native Texas bird, and the migrating monarch butterflies that are so threatened. We also increased the soil organic matter, and I'll get into why that's important for our water and our climate. And we created a delightful outdoor space year-round. It's got a lot of things that are interesting going on in it, not just seeing the wildlife, but also seeing a huge diversity of native plants in that space that change seasonally. And not just wildflowers, but also the native grasses provide color in the fall and winter. This also provides a space that's resilient to drought and flooding. The native plants do really well despite our heat and dry conditions. And in flooded situations, this house is just above the floodplain, and were the water ever to come up into their yard, it would have to fill the basins before it would get to the house. So these act as a sort of moat against that sort of rising water. And one of the other major benefits is that water captured in these basins is going to sink into the ground, process of percolation, infiltration, go deep into that soil and start recharging the local groundwater that feeds local wells and also the springs of the Medina River. Now here we have the backyard. It looks pretty boring when we got started. Here it is all torn up. The process of making these is fairly messy. You can see that this soil is pretty chalky, lots of limestone, not great for growing things, but we have some tricks up our sleeve that we can make that better with. And you also see an area that's surrounded by T-posts and fenced off. That's where we were digging out the cistern overflow to get some of that water to be used in the backyard, not just going straight out to the pasture. Here it is with compost mixed into those berms of the permaculture orchard. You can see the uprights of the pipes that we're about to attach overflow structures to. And you can see the team working on planting native plants in that berm and swale right there in the corner rain garden. And here's what it looked like in August, which is very hot and very dry. You can see how green and lush the vegetation is. The cover crops are doing a great job of preparing the soil in the orchard for tree planting. And then here it's how it looked in November after we planted the trees, mulched everything in, and also planted the grapes. So really nice space, very, very productive with lots going on. In this process, we begin with analyzing watershed. And that starts with the LiDAR data set, which we use to create some maps. Here's the full design, which takes into account the way the water flows and the natural topography. I'll get more into that. This is the full property map showing the 250 acres, but we just focused our project efforts in this area around the homestead. But we hope that the native plants that we reintroduced here will radiate out and help the entire ranch have more diversity. You can see down there at the bottom is where the Medina River is. Hicks Creek flows through their property, and the homestead is on that higher ground there. We find that our homeowners really like that topo map with the rainbow colors so that they can see that the higher ground is in red and the lower ground is in blue. This is our network map. Our watershed analysis includes 4 maps: the terrain map, the first one I showed you, that colorful topo map. Then this is our drainage network map. The blue line shows the low point where the water flows and where we have an opportunity to catch it. And then this map we often hear looks like abstract art, but it's our most informative map because it shows us what areas feed into those blue lines. So for example, that Y-shaped orange section in the center feeds to that blue line, and we can catch that stormwater in a basin. I want to share a video if it'll play. No, it doesn't look like it's going to play for us, so skip through it. You can see that on our YouTube channel. It's a video of how we use this watershed analysis to create a model of the property that takes into account the topography. So when we get into the design process, we do detailed on-site measurements based on the existing conditions. There's that boring lawn again. Not a lot going on. And what we realized is that this time we would have been well off to test the soil organic matter to establish a baseline and understand what the condition of the soil is that we're working with. And that matters because soil organic matter is a major factor in how much water the soil can hold. So here's our site map with each of the features showing numbered so that we can break down how much water is captured in each. So if these basins had concrete at their bottom, they would catch the amount of water listed over here on the gallons column. But of course, they're not concrete lined. These are basins that allow for a lot of infiltration into the soil below them. And the water storage capacity of that soil is variable based on the amount of soil organic matter that's in that soil. So the numbers that are in gray represent the calculation of the water storage capacity of the soil itself. So I want to highlight that the soil sponge is our largest green infrastructure feature, and for every 1% increase in soil organic matter, we gain 20,000 gallons of water storage capacity per acre. This is an often quoted NRCS statistic. We didn't come up with it, but there's a couple of assumptions that back that calculation. Is that we're dealing with a medium textured soil. We're only calculating the additional organic matter, the additional water storage capacity based on the change in organic matter. So this is just a change in storage, not total storage. And then we're also assuming that the organic matter holds 10 times its weight in water. I want to highlight the practices we did that increased the soil organic matter and lowered our need for water. So we did cover cropping inoculated with mycorrhizal fungi, and both of these are techniques that really help the soil to have healthy microbiota that fix nitrogen into the soil and also heal the carbon cycle. So they're taking carbon out of the air and putting that back down into the soil with their roots. We also used mulch and compost to reinvigorate the soil and boost the fertility. And also the mulch and river rock soil cover helped to retain moisture in the soil by limiting the exposure to evaporation. So I want to highlight that the statistic only looks at increasing the soil organic matter down 6 inches. But we have very deep-rooted species in this system whose roots reach 8 feet plus into the soil. So if we're actually increasing the soil organic matter deeper down than just that first 6 inches, the water storage capacity of our soil could be quite incredible. Just huge amounts of water could be stored in our soil. And we don't have an actual number for this site of how much more water we stored in the soil because we never established that baseline. But when we tested the soil in August to look at what amendments we should use under our fruit trees, we found that we had 6.2% soil organic matter. And most of our lawn areas have less than 1% soil organic matter. So the native prairie that was here would have had 8 to 12% soil organic matter. So you can see that we could gain significant water storage by doing this. So that takes us through the earthworks design. And in the next video, I will address the plants plan as well as the installation phases for this project.